Former quarterback Erik Kramer had a storied football career in the NFL for close to a decade. Years after he hung up his cleats, he was dealt a series of personal tragedies that could level any of us. While in the throes of depression, he tried taking his own life in 2015. Miraculously, he survived a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The injury left him mentally incapacitated, and the moment was an opportune time for a con artist to swoop in. Under the guise of trying to help Erik, former girlfriend Courtney Baird slid back into his life, and in the process, swindled him out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Erik's childhood friend Anna Dergan was the first to become suspicious that Courtney was taking advantage of him, and then promptly kicked off an investigation of her own. Their journey to get justice was made all the more complicated when Courtney secretly married Erik. Slowly, Erik's brain healed, and while the legal fight was an uphill battle, Courtney ultimately pleaded guilty to dependent adult abuse, theft, identity theft, and forgery over financially exploiting Erik. Erik Kramer and Anna Dergan joined Forbes True Crime to share their story. Hi everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis, one of the hosts of Forbes True Crime. Joining me now are Erik Kramer and Anna Dergan, both executive producers of The Quarterback and The Con Artist. Anna and Erik, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
I have conducted over 1,000 interviews at Forbes, and I start and I prepare the same way. I get all the notes and then I know a place to start. And this is the first time I ever didn't know where to start. I've read about your stories. I've listened to all 10 podcast episodes. And then even at the end, I was like, let me go back and listen again, because the podcast really goes through chapters of your lives. It seems like you've lived 1,000 lives in the past couple of years, maybe decade or so. You both have known each other. You both have been great friends since childhood. Erik, you have had a legendary NFL career. You overcame personal tragedies. You were taken advantage of by a con artist during your most vulnerable time in your life, and you overcame that. And Anna, you have been an advocate every step of the way, and you were the first person to say, hey, I am on to that con artist. So I think the first place to start would be, why are you sharing your stories now?
Well, I'll speak for myself in that it's been over a decade since I attempted suicide. And along that way, like where I am today versus where I was back then are two completely different lifetimes. And so this all started basically wanting to talk about what happened during some of these periods of time. And it kind of evolved from there. And as you mentioned, as we were chatting before, that I think the idea that talking about what happened to me, if we just get into Courtney Baird and the con that she pulled over an extended period of time, I think being able to reveal people so that she particularly can't do this again, or that she'll be known, she'll be a known commodity wherever she goes. And so I think that is the motivation that I found. Partly, it was also in part that I think it's a way to say thank you to the people who had supported me through one of the rougher patches of my life, in fact, the roughest patch. And I think that getting people like my son Dylan or Anna or Robert Espinoza or Chris Gurman and on and on and on it goes, just the people that were there at what for them must have been shocking times, and yet they stepped up and were as the definition of what friends and family could and should be.
And then Anna, from your perspective, you were Erik's advocate every step of the way, even to the point of potentially being sued at one point. Talk to us about your experience a bit.
So when Erik was attempting to sue me, that was at the direction of other people. unscrupulous people who were trying to deflect from their own criminal activity. However, I know I did nothing wrong, so I had nothing to fear at all. And it just goes to show you how incapacitated Erik was during the time, that there is absolutely no way he would ever, had he known what was really transpiring, would he have even considered suing me. But this whole ordeal, it took about 8 years before justice ever came through. It took a toll on a lot of people, including Erik's family and friends, because we were all led, disappointed through the judicial system, especially since Courtney Baird had confessed to her criminal activities and nothing transpired, or there was no justice actually until 8 years later. I always held the judicial system in high reverence after going through what Erik went through and what his family had to go through. It really has, I've lost a lot of respect for the judicial system.
And I think we'll get the road to justice. We'll get to that in a moment. But beforehand, I want to talk about the events that transpired that ultimately led to the perfect opportunity for Courtney Baird, the con artist, to come swooping in. Because Erik, like we said, you had an NFL career, you were quarterback on a few teams for almost a decade. Then you suffered through some personal tragedies that would level anyone. Miraculously, you are here. But Courtney Baird found the perfect time to swoop in. So if you could both talk from your perspectives about that time.
Okay, so when it comes to my experience, as you've touched on, there were a series of things that had happened personally, that starting with really my mom getting sick with cancer and telling me about it the day after Mother's Day back in 2011. And then from there, Griffin, my oldest son, had been, he went into drug rehab when he was in 10th grade, near the beginning of the year, and was eventually, had no drugs in his system for at least, I'd say, a year and a half. And it's the most confident I had ever seen him be as a person when he was in the outpatient program. And because they reintroduced school again, but in a very one-on-one type of environment. And Griffin had some learning troubles, some brain troubles that prevented him from learning. And so this new environment he was in, he thrived in. So he was living at home, but basically sleeping at home, and he was gone most of every day. And then he comes back and goes to school. And I could see that toward the tail end of the outpatient program, his sort of mental switch went from, oh, thank you, Mom and Dad, because had you not gotten me to rehab, I would have been dead or in jail. To, oh, that was brainwashing. Well, no, it wasn't. And had that program continued, or he continued in it, then I think, I think he would have had a better chance. So eventually Griffin succumbed to a drug overdose and then ultimately died on August 30th, 2011. And which was, I could tell you right now, there'll never be a Saturday in my life. And then I think the kind of the lifelong, I would say, exhaustion of that coupled with his death, then my mom passed away about 8 months later. Around that time that she passed away, my dad uh, contracted esophageal cancer from some untreated acid reflux. And so that was about a 3 year or so downward spiral. And I just, there's nothing that says, Erik, you're going to have depression now. It just kind of creeps in and you begin losing perspective on your own life. And so I think it was during that time, in 2015, early in that year, Courtney Baird and I had an on again, off again, mostly off relationship during this, 3 or so year period. And I had broken up with her for the last time in January of 2015. And so later on that year, I became kind of acutely depressed. And that's when I made the attempt on my life in August, which, think about this, that was the day before my younger son Dylan's first day of school. But I didn't have that perspective. And so somehow I miraculously survived this thing. And it was during this time when my mind wasn't working, I mean, literally not working,
Mhm.
that Courtney came and reinserted herself into my life. So it wasn't like, I made this attempt and we were together. No, we were apart. And she saw the vulnerability and recognized that I am the perfect candidate to take advantage of.
And in the podcast series, I mean, Anna, you can sniff this out. It feels like a mile away. You're the first one onto her. So when did you start seeing these red flags and what were they? Was it almost immediately?
It wasn't immediately because I don't like to think ill will of people, but it was okay. I started seeing her personal belongings, her daughter's personal belongings at his house. I'm like, okay, that's a little bit odd. And then when I would go over and I said, okay, Erik, we got to pay some bills, your doctor's bills. And then he would say, I'm overdrawn. And I'm like, so, I knew what his account information was. And I'm like, that's odd. So I'd go back 3 weeks later and say, okay, let's pay these bills now. And he goes, oh, I haven't had time to go to the bank. And then when I would go over, I would see boxes addressed to Courtney Baird from Amazon. Not one, not two, but like 5 or 6 or 7. Like all the time I would come over, there'd be 4 or 5 boxes addressed to Courtney Baird at his address. So that triggered me to start going back and looking into his accounts. And that's when I discovered, when I say discovered, it was daily ATM withdrawals, $300 to $700 per day. And and then we went to, and there were local ATM machines. Then there was credit card cash advances. Erik would never take a cash advance ever. And he didn't need to. And then there's all these credit card charges. Well, then that's when I knew it was pure theft. There was nothing else but theft. And I went straight to the police. I didn't even bother addressing her.
And I mean, thank God for you, really, because you were looking through the bank records. You even note in the podcast at one point, you noticed she wasn't even looking at the price tags when she was putting things in her cart. And I've been working since I was a teenager. I have always looked at the price tag. The only time you would never look at the price tag is if you're using someone else's money. So then talk to us about what happened with the legal fight, because it seemed like, and I'm not going to get into every detail because everyone needs to listen to this podcast, but you were onto her and it seemed like it could be going in her favor, but she pulls what was described as the ultimate checkmate and gets married to Erik.
Well, right. She for lack of a better word, as a one of our probate attorneys, Lisa McCarley, stated, it was a kidnap. So she was being investigated. She knew she was being investigated. So she knew she knew she was stealing. She knew she was being investigated. She goes in and meets with the detective and confesses to her crime. And he basically tells her, we're still investigating. You better, move out, let the family worry about Erik's, caregiving services, and go back and get your job. And that was apparently a recommendation for her in her own mind to go take Erik to go get married and not tell anybody about it, obviously, because she would know that we would all be saying, no, this is not going to happen while he's in this vulnerable, incapacitated state. So that marriage, for lack of a better word, stalled the investigation because the deputy district attorney at that time did not want to prosecute. And just think about that. We, as tax-paying citizens, and has Erik's family and friends, we all know that she's guilty. She knows she's guilty. She confesses that she's guilty. And yet the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office decides not to prosecute because the marriage muddied the waters. And so they kicked us to the conservatorship, which was a whole other debacle in itself.
And I think that this was, right, a con artist tactic, a red flag of isolation. She was isolating Erik from you guys with that marriage. And then that's one of Jonathan Walton's red flags in Anatomy of a Con Artist. And then Erik, from your perspective, because in the podcast, your mental state in this time is described as somewhat of a 6-year-old. You can sit there and watch TV for hours. You look like you do now, except it's like if you have a conversation with you, it's like talking to a 6-year-old. And then one day, it's almost like you snap out of it. Your brain is healed and the veil's lifted from your eyes. And you're like, what the heck just happened to me? I mean, what was that realization point like when you realized, hey, I just got hundreds of thousands of dollars stolen from me over the course of a couple of years?
That's not quite how it worked. I would say when your brain doesn't, there's no light switch that goes on. It's kind of like waking up. You kind of wake up in stages, right? And so for me, what happened was I had been looking to buy a house. And so ultimately the terms of the purchase were accepted by the family that was selling the house. But then the house wasn't going through. The sale was not going through. And after about, I'd say 4, 5, 6 days, somewhere in there, it occurred to me that, wait a minute, I'm conserved. And I'm conserved because Courtney's stealing from me. That's it. And so about a week goes by and I don't say anything to Courtney about it. I just knew that she was. And so I fly to Chicago to play in a Chicago Bears alumni golf outing. And when I return home, Courtney is on the taxi brings me home, I want to say around 11:30 at night. And it was strange for Courtney to even be awake. And so she comes toward me as I come in the door and she says, well, how was golf? And I just said, fine. And she says, oh, well, how was Chicago? Fine. She says, well, what's wrong? And I said, nothing, other than I'm getting a divorce. And she goes, divorce? He says, well, I'm not getting a divorce. I said, fine, I am. And I went up and went to bed. And so when I came back down in the morning, she sprang off the couch, which apparently is where and I can guarantee you she didn't go to sleep that night. Guaranteed. And so this is probably around 6 o'clock in the morning. And so I go down and have breakfast, and that's how that day started. So there was no like light switch on. By the way, Brittany, she forged 4 checks. She stole probably $300,000. And um, so it wasn't like, but this is all stuff that I went through later. I didn't have my capacity back when the story I'm just describing to you now, I was still incapacitated. So it was kind of like, all right, you got the shade still drawn, but there's a little light creeping in here or there. That was it.
I can't imagine that. I can't imagine the light coming in, you starting to put the pieces together a little bit and realizing, wait, this person's not only stealing from me, they're in my house. They're here every day. They've been stealing from me drips and drabs for years now. And I'm curious, I mean, it's such a mic drop moment too, by the way, that we glossed over the I'm getting a divorce. That's an incredible way to introduce that. But what I would want to do immediately is A, get this person out of my house, but B, start a legal fight against them. And it felt like it was a really hard uphill battle. And I talked to Jonathan Walton, he's the host of The Quarterback and the Con Artist. And when I talked to him about his con artist, because he got nearly $100,000 stolen from him, he said, unless you go to the police station and you're bleeding out to death, they're not going to take your case and you have to be your own advocate. So, can you both talk to, from your perspectives, what were some of the hardest challenges you found in this legal fight?
Well, I can start by saying the challenge was, as I stated previously, she confessed. So what more do you need to prove? Wait a minute, it gets even better. She was on probation for forgery, paying her restitution with stolen funds from Erik's accounts for a previous crime. And yet, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office didn't want to prosecute because the marriage muddied the waters, and then they punted us, for lack of a better word, to the conservatorship court system, and they figured, oh, she would just go away because now Erik's going to be conserved financially, so she won't be able to get any more of his finances or his money or his funds. Well, that wasn't the case. The case was they appointed an attorney to represent Erik in this conservatorship case, which we thought, okay, he's going to see all the clear facts that Courtney's been stealing, and this will come to a quick end. Well, that was the furthest from the truth. This conservatorship appointed attorney, basically, how we felt was basically, I wouldn't say advocating for Courtney, but basically defending her criminal activity in a sense that, yeah, she admitted to it. So she says she wouldn't do it again. And they're married now. And let's move on, type of thing. Let's go get a post-nuptial agreement. And that was the other, again, first, the criminal judicial system failed Erik, right? By not prosecuting Courtney. Had they prosecuted Courtney in the very beginning, Erik would have only been out $80,000 and maybe, $20,000 in legal fees. By not doing so, his legal fees went up to $400,000, and she was able to steal about another $220,000 because now she's quote unquote legally married to him. So both systems, the conservatorship probate system at the Los Angeles probate courts, as well as the criminal courts in Los Angeles County, failed Erik tremendously.
And then, Erik, from your perspective, when all of the light comes in, really, and you're fully aware of what happened to you, I mean, how are you feeling about this legal fight? And how are you feeling what happened to you in court?
So, after some time of realizing what had happened, so while in court, so my first day in court was I was being represented by the conservatorship court attorney. There was another attorney representing my aunt, who at that time was requesting for the judge to rule that I should be conserved. The first person to testify was David Linkshite, the detective. I didn't know he was there. I didn't know what he said. Anna had to show me the transcript to know that I spoke, and that Courtney spoke, and that David Linkshite spoke. So that was the state of my mind after being married. I'd been married for a few days by then. So I was not allowed to be married. So why is it I'm medically not allowed to be married, but legally I am? Because the only way you can become conserved, only way, is to have a brain deficiency. That's it. And yet you've got a legal system where lawyers and judges don't know a thing about the medical system, and yet they're making legal determinations and representations based on medical issues that they know nothing about.
I mean, I just want to pull my hair out hearing this story. I can't believe that all of those hoops on what had happened to you. And Anna, you're just a fearless fight throughout this all. But I mean, what's most frustrating is, Erik, you were taken advantage of, full stop, obviously, during the most vulnerable part of your life. You were incapacitated, you were unable to make these decisions, and you were essentially robbed. For other people who have a con artist come into their life, it's hard to see that they're getting scammed for whatever reason. But Anna, I mean, you're on the outside here. You're seeing this happen. You're seeing this scam play out. Let's say a con artist is in someone's life. I'm curious from both of your perspectives, what would be your advice to the people around the loved one who's getting scammed, who they can see this clearly? What advice would you give that person? Would it be to tell the person that they love that's getting scammed? I mean, what does that really look like?
At one point, we all got together and we were going to decide to kidnap Erik. And this was before the marriage, thinking that by separating them, we would be able to get through to him. However, he had a traumatic brain injury. It didn't matter what anybody did at that time, what anybody said at that time. Whoever had his ear last, that's what he would parrot. So it just needed time for him to heal. What someone could do, I would say, is all of you gather together and separate that individual from the con artist at some point. Start having receipts, start showing them what has been transpiring if you can. I was lucky enough to have access to Erik's accounts, so where I can show the police, so they very clearly saw Erik's activity 2 years prior to Courtney becoming involved in stealing to when she was, and they can see the huge difference. And the money was just going out. It was just going out on a daily basis. So I would say if family and friends notice one of their friends or family are being taken advantage of, collectively, don't do it alone, but collectively gather, 4 or 5 people, separate them from the con artist and try to have a conversation with them. And if that doesn't work, file any type of police report that you can and file for conservatorship. At least, hopefully, that will scare the con artist enough to stop doing and get out of the person's life, or at least stop some of the theft from occurring, or slow it down, I should say.
And then, Eric, what's your perspective there as someone who wasn't able to understand fully what was happening to you to now completely being on the other side and seeing what played out and seeing just what happened?
I this is going back several years now. Um, how bad I felt then and continue to today, probably will forever, that I felt that people like Anna and my aunt and uncle and Dylan and just everybody, that they had to sit and watch me
Mhm.
metaphorically be raped again and again and again and again. And yet the system, I don't care if it's the criminal justice system or the conservatorship court system, and the people in it protected the thief. And so, like Anna said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what the answer is, because there is no system right now, as we sit here today. There is no system in place designed to protect someone like me at that time. There just isn't. And there's a lot of folks in that category, whether it was someone like me that had a traumatic brain injury, or that just simply is their capacity to care for themselves has left. And so the door is, it's like water. The crack, once the cracks appear, water seeps in it every time. And there is no system in place to go, we've got cracks in our system. Enter Anna and Erik, because moving forward, there's going to be a cavalry coming to get this system exposed along with the people in it. And I'll put it to you like this. If I was subject, according to Dr. Tomaszewski's report, to undue influence, not just from Courtney Baird, anybody walking the planet. So, as Anna alluded to, if Courtney Baird stole 300,000 and the legal system took legally 400,000, who's the bigger thief?
I mean, it's a really good question. And I mean, there's so many people that are exposed, right? When you think about your situation, someone who had a traumatic brain injury, the elderly, anyone who's sick, perhaps someone who went through a traumatic life event, and you saying the system exposes these people, they leave them most vulnerable, and I mean, anyone can just come in and commit this type of financial crime, commit a different crime. I mean, it's unbearable to even think about, but I like what you said about you guys are coming now. You're sounding the alarm, and here you are. You're not letting this go anymore. I mean, what do you want people to gain from your story, and what's next?
Well, I think that this is my story, and the people involved in it, starting with Anna, are here to say that look how long this took. And yet, if you don't stop, if you continue to push on, you can, even within a flawed system, you can reach the finish line. Not that we have, but you can reach the finish line for at least this case. And I think that should show people that don't stop fighting. Don't stop fighting for the people that you care about that are getting taken advantage of. Because the system isn't set up to protect me. It was set up to protect Courtney Baird and all of the lawyers who make money off of protecting Courtney Baird. They love that system.
And if anyone's watching, I mean, if something ever happened to me where I fell victim to a con artist, I would want someone with the force of Anna Dergan on my side, being my advocate for years, trying to bring justice here. I mean, Anna, what's next for you?
I'm hoping to get legislation to recognize that when people go to the conservatorship system or guardianship system in other states, it's mostly the elderly. If there's any type of criminal investigation, if someone is stealing from the elderly or stealing from the proposed conservatee, there should be an automatic stay, an automatic conservatorship, so that the finances won't be stolen anymore. At least while the investigation is happening, the criminal investigation is happening. Because if you don't stop the theft, there will be no funds left. And that's what Erik almost fell victim to that as well. Because again, the judicial system, the conservatorship attorney that was appointed to Erik had the doctor's declaration of incapacity, saying that he could not make any sound judgments, that he was being taken advantage of by Courtney Baird. The judge had that same information. Yet she did put a temporary conservatorship of the estate over Erik, but that didn't stop the theft. Courtney still kept, stealing from Erik, even though she told the judge she wouldn't anymore. She's married. So why is she going to stop? So I hope that the people realize that you have to fight. You have to be your own advocate. You have to be your own detective. You have to fight for justice, because there's no one else that will do it, especially for your parents, your grandparents that are not in the right mind to do it or understand what's transpiring.
Well,
And if you don't mind, I'll say one thing on to add to that, Brittany, and that is that okay, if all it would have taken, okay, this is after we're married, all it would have taken, the conservatorship court attorney fought against me being conserved of the estate. So if at that time, then there was a separate hearing for me to be conserved of the person. If you get conserved of the estate and of the person, now it's like that's all you need to get the marriage annulled. That's it. So, but this guy stepped in front of that process. And while there, I didn't know this, but Anna told me, while they're in court that day, he approaches my aunt's attorney and says, you know what? Instead of doing this conservatorship of the person, let's just have a postnuptial agreement. So another thing I want to add to that is this. If you graduate from high school or college or get into some, in order to go into some profession, there's a certain standard that you have to meet to graduate. So not so in the conservatorship court system. So this court-appointed attorney was handed the report by Dr. Tomaszewski saying not only was I incapacitated, but that who was doing the stealing and how much. Then he was also given the contact information for the detective. And Anna, of those people, guess who he called? Nobody. Yet in another case, he decided, I'll call not only the attorney, I'll investigate all of these people that would be witnesses. So he got to pick and choose what he pays attention to and what he doesn't. So there should never be a system in place like that for anything, much less here's a guy that's supposed to be appointed as my attorney to represent me. Instead, he's representing the criminal.
And I mean, I'm just a listener here, and I'm just a listener to the podcast, and just hearing this is so frustrating. And I just cannot imagine what it was like living it from both of your perspectives here. And this conversation only scratches the surface. The whole story, you go through the whole story on the quarterback and the con artist. Weekly episodes are dropping. Where can people find it?
It could be found on wherever you listen to your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, iHeart. It does wherever you listen to your podcasts. I think for at least for me and the family, as we were witnessing all this, that's how we all lost respect for the law. Or I'm sorry, not the law. We all respect the law. We just lost respect for the judicial system because everybody, including the conservatorship attorney, the probate judge, um, everybody had knowledge and confirmation that Courtney was stealing, including Courtney confessing to it in court. Why wasn't that put in a stop? Knowing that Erik received a declaration of from his doctor saying that he was incapacitated. So to me, it says, okay, medical doctor, we hear what you're saying, but in the legal system, it's not enough. How can that be? How can that be when common sense tells you Erik can't understand what's going on? And as it is written in a medical doctor's, board certified doctor's report. So that's the frustrating part, that the legal system failed in so many avenues, that we just want to bring awareness to people. Hey, this could happen to you, and it will happen to one of your loved ones if you don't put proper, you know, protections in place. Always make sure someone is checking in on one of your elderly parents or your grandparents, because there is a con artist out there that's going to notice, and they're going to swoop in and shut you out.
And I think that's a great place to end on. And I think that, thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing your story here. And I think that this can help a lot of people. Anna Dergan, Erik Kramer, thank you again for joining me. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Brittany, thank you so much.